Good morning. Today we welcome Suzie Boss, and it's my great privilege to introduce her. Suzie is a writer, a journalist, an educational consultant, and an advocate for social innovation and education change. Some of you, like me, may follow her contributions to the George Lucas Education Foundation web publication called Edutopia, the Stanford Social Innovation Review, Educational Leadership, the New York Times, and Huffington Post. Suzie has written extensively on the topic of project-based learning and serves as a national faculty member at the Buck Institute for Education. Her most recent book, titled Bringing Innovation to School, was released last year, and she shares many stories of educators, students, and schools who are striking out new pathways to sparking creativity, inventiveness, and innovation. Suzie's most recent article in the Huffington Post is titled, "What Are Schools Doing to Prepare Today's Students to Be Tomorrow's Innovators?" Today she will inspire us with her talk, her TEDx talk entitled, Learning from Social Action Heroes. Suzie has asked me to offer her apologies. She's overcoming laryngitis right now, so she just wants to bear with her as you listen. So thank you, and welcome to Suzie.
Good morning. So I would like to talk with you this morning about superheroes. About superpowers. And why it's so important for us to tap into our superpowers early in life so that we can do amazing things with them as we go through life and grow up. So I got started thinking about superpowers a couple of years ago because of a little experiment I was doing with teachers. In workshops with teachers, I would ask them two questions, and I'd give them a little 3x5 card to put their answers on. First question was, back when you were a student, how would your teachers have described you? So kind of looking backwards, how were you labeled as a student? Second question, now that you're an adult, what are your superpowers today? And so I had a purpose for doing this. We would gather up these cards, and later in the workshop, teachers would look at all these different profiles and kind of sort them into teams if you were going to balance some groups together so that you would be tapping individual talents and interests and also kind of balancing different styles of learners. This was the idea for the activity, but there was a surprising outcome. What I wasn't prepared for was a big disconnect between answers 1 and answer 2. What was that early label as a student, and what's your superpower today? So let's look at a couple of them. So on the left, you're going to see kind of that, how my teacher would have labeled me. So the passive, shy student grows up to be what you see on the other side of the arrow, the compassionate individual. The one who's always stirring things up, questioning authority, look what happens to that person. The person who's not really up to the game, not working up to the potential, look what happens here. This is the lifelong learner. Who knew that that was in that person all along? And the one who's a little dazed and confused, not quite sure what's going on, has this amazing superpower to connect right with the heart. So I got really curious about this disconnect. What happened in the middle there? And I started wondering, were those superpowers within us all along, but maybe school wasn't the place to express them, to bring them out. Maybe you were a little shy about sharing your big passions for the world. But that also made me curious about if we're really going to make the most of our potential, shouldn't school be a place where we come to discover our superpowers, get really good at using them to accomplish great things? So that's what I want to talk about today, because we're in a situation in our world where we need all of you to be tapping into your superpowers. When young people that I meet and that I sometimes write about tell me about the great projects that they're undertaking, you can see just how far they can go when they feel that they have this potential and they have their permission to get going in that direction from a young age. You can imagine how far they're going to go in life as a result. So I want to share some examples of what I'm seeing already from young people who are not afraid to put their superpowers to good use. So these are some students from Massachusetts in the US who are building a clean, efficient cook stove that could improve the health of people who are cooking and heating their homes with wood. It would not only clean the air, but it would prevent a lot of lung disease, particularly in young people. Some students are developing coalitions. This one, the Student Voice Coalition, has a Twitter hashtag of StuVoice, shorthand version. And these students have gone from, what their goal is to have a voice, to have a student voice in where education is going, in education change. And they've gone from social media activities on Twitter to having literally a seat at the policy-making table in education. Some students in Oakland, California, wanted a different kind of classroom than what was available to them. They had an idea for a design-build project where they were going to use their capacities as innovators to build things that would improve their local community. And they didn't have enough space to do it, so they ran their own grassroots fundraising campaign on Kickstarter, raised enough money to buy themselves a shipping container, which they have repurposed as an amazing classroom space. So these are the kinds of things that are possible when young people feel like, yep, we have big ideas and we can put them to use already, because through these projects, they've discovered not only kind of their own maybe superpowers, but also what they really, really care about. To a person, you can ask them to fill in the blanks of this statement, and they have a ready answer. They've had a chance to discover this and answer this for themselves already. And this is what I'm hoping you're thinking about for yourselves. How might you answer this question today? So, discovering that you have a passion, that you really care deeply about something, which is kind of at the heart of our superpowers, that's one great step forward, but it's not enough. If you only care deeply, but you don't know what to do next about solving some problem that bothers you or that matters to you, that's just a formula for frustration. You need to know kind of what are the next steps? How do I go from thinking and caring to acting and doing? And fortunately, we can find lots of great role models to help us on our way with this. This is the motto for an organization called Ashoka that was one of the first to recognize the power of social innovators and to actually kind of unpack what is it about them that makes them so successful, to really look at their superpowers in kind of with a microscope and identify how do they think, how do they work, what sorts of projects are they taking on. And their motto, everyone a change maker, brings us to that idea that we all have this potential in us. If we can develop our sense of purpose, what do we really care about, our passion, and then have some ideas to go forth and make things happen. When I ask students to think of innovators in their minds, who do they imagine? They often come up with examples like this, the founder of Apple, or maybe they think about the past and think of people like Thomas Edison or Henry Ford. These were, of course, important innovators and inventors in our history, but the entrepreneurs that I'm interested in learning more about and in using as role models, they're not so focused so much on the next great consumer product, but the next great idea that could really improve the world. So let's look at a few examples. This is a soon-to-open library in Africa. It's called Libri, and it's unlike any library you've ever seen. It's going to open with no books on the shelves, because the idea is the people who use the library will come here, they'll figure out what it is, what sort of information they need, and then they can either print on demand the books that they want or create them themselves using the tools of production and creativity that are going to be housed here. So unlike libraries where you go to think quietly, think deep thoughts, do some research on your own, this is a library space where people come together for noisy, productive conversations about changing their community. Here in India, there are some amazing humanitarian engineers taking on challenges that are going to improve the lives of many, many people. This project, DREV, the designers have come up with a very affordable but highly efficient prosthetic knee that's being tested and prototyped and eventually will be manufactured here. Very simple to produce, very inexpensive, a tiny fraction of what a prosthetic device would cost in the Western part of the world where I'm coming from the US, for example. That's going to have amazing life-changing impact for people who will be much more mobile. And then around the world, we're finding that people who have great skills as technologists, who are working for some of our biggest and most successful companies, are using their off hours to tackle problems that are really points of struggle for people in the nonprofit world. Nonprofits are working on, tough international challenges, but they may not have anyone on staff who has the skills of a data scientist to look at big data sets and analyze them, or take results in mathematical terms and turn them into something visual that we can understand. So our technologists even are getting on board the social innovation game by bringing their skills to these sorts of challenges. So innovation in the social sector can happen in all kinds of disciplines, and all kinds of problems are being addressed this way. And when you see these big ideas in practice, they seem like, especially if you're a student, you may think, students I've talked to you sometimes react by saying, well, that's so big, I could never get something going like that, maybe someday. But what can I do? I'm just a kid after all. But if you get social entrepreneurs, social innovators, to go back to the beginning, if you will, their origin story as kind of a social action hero, how they got started is often something very humble and very simple, and something that moved them to act. This is kind of a common trait among social entrepreneurs and innovators. When they see something that seems unfair or unjust, they can't just sit by. They have to act. They feel compelled to act. So here's Johan Koss. He's the tall fellow you see here. And his life changed when he was a younger man. He was an Olympic speed skater from Norway, wound up winning gold medals and setting world records. And he was training for the next Olympics when he went on a goodwill trip to Eritrea in Africa. This is a country that had gone through years of war for independence and had just left the country in tatters, lots of poverty and devastation. And he saw something there that changed the course of his life. He looked out on a field, just kind of a dirt field, and he saw some kids playing, went closer to take a look, and he saw that it looked like they were playing soccer, but what they were playing with was one of the boys had a t-shirt with long enough sleeves that they could tie it up into a ball and kick that around. And it gave him pause, and it made him think about all the resources he has at his disposal, as a premier athlete. He has any gear he wants, all the trainers he needs. And here are kids with nothing who still have this spirit of wanting to play, wanting to participate in that way. And from that moment, he made a promise that to these kids, I'll come back, I'm going to bring you some proper gear and get you started. And he did that. He went home. It's a long story, but he won his gold medals, and then kind of like a Pied Piper, he rallied the children of Norway to donate gear, and he took it back, gave it out, but that still wasn't enough. That was just the start. And from there, he's developed an amazing program called Right to Play that takes as its basic idea that every child in the world, but especially in the hardest hit places, in our war zones, in our places that are recovering from disaster, if they don't have chances to play as children, they'll never fully heal and recover, and neither will their societies. And so his organization has developed just some ingenious games and sports that they use to help rebuild kids' capacities and get them started toward a healthier future. And what's interesting about him is not only did he have that first spark of something that kind of lit a fire in him, but then he took advantage of what I like to think of as the innovator's toolkit. What are the great ideas that he could use, put to work to take an idea and make it better and better. So that toolkit, fortunately, is available to you. We can learn from these innovators, borrow their great ideas, and start using them right now. You're plenty old enough to start thinking this way. And one of the first ones is to see opportunity everywhere. Even in places that seem like, gosh, we have nothing to work with here, so much we want to do, innovators can find opportunity. Jessica Matthews was still a student when she had this great idea for a free source of energy that's clean, renewable, and kind of fun, and that's play. We just heard about Johan Koss and the spirit of play. She kind of took a similar idea in a different direction. And what you see here is a ball called socket that has a very ingenious little device inside of it that captures kinetic energy and saves it so that the soccer ball, once it's played with a little bit, turns into an energy source. You can take it home, plug a light into it, and have light for 3 hours from playing for just a little while, just a few minutes. And around the world, we see this same spirit of finding opportunity everywhere, going by different names. Here in India, there's a word, jugad, that has to do with frugal innovation, making opportunity where it may seem impossible. In Africa, there's a Swahili phrase that you see here, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, jua kali, that has to do with innovation out in the sun, out in the open, out in public. And in the US, where I'm from, we talk about hip-hop genius. And this is in, it's kind of some of our areas that are hard hit, seeming to be without opportunity. Yet there's a certain spirit there that gives rise to creativity. And the motto for that kind of thinking is flipping something out of nothing. And that's exactly what happens. The second idea I want to share with you is remixing good ideas. This is something innovators do all the time. And here's how it might look. Dr. V, the late Dr. V, was an amazing innovator from India who was inspired to start a highly successful healthcare initiative by thinking about the way that fast food restaurants work so efficiently. His organization that he started, the Aravind Eye Care System, has been called the McDonald's of healthcare. So he took that idea, brought it to a problem, and has done, incredible things with this. Sometimes changing the scale is a way to get to innovation. Big ideas can seem really big, but sometimes they start by thinking really, really small. In my community, we're starting to see these little tiny libraries, free public libraries that are popping up everywhere. You leave books, you take books, a whole different scale of what a library might be. And Kiva is an organization that specializes in giving not big loans, but really tiny, tiny loans, micro loans, that have the capacity to change the lives of millions of people. So thinking small can be a way to get big results. And another strategy that innovators use to great effectiveness is always asking themselves, what else can I do with this? If I have one great idea, how can I use it in a different way? In my hometown, we have a project called the Rebuilding Center that covers a whole city block, and it's full of reused building materials that have been taken from houses that, instead of taking them to the dump, the landfill, they've been taken apart by hand. All the pieces have been cleaned and sorted, and they're available at a very low cost to use. So that's a great, fabulous idea that accomplishes a lot of good. But that's not enough, because on top of that, there are classes there to teach people home repair skills. There are artists who are using this space for creative reuse and sharing their ideas in a gallery. So all kinds of things continue to happen, all going toward the goal of rebuilding the community by thinking about what else can we do with this. Almost second to the last idea here is embracing optimism. This is a young man named Jack Andraka, whom I'm sure you'll be hearing about. He's only 15, so just about your age. But he came up with an idea to come up with an early test for pancreatic cancer, a disease that usually is diagnosed when it's too late to treat. And so he had this great idea in his head. He needed access to a lab to test it. He started sending out letters to universities that had the equipment he wanted, and they all turned him down. But because he's an optimist, he kept asking. He got 199 no's until finally he got the yes he needed to make his idea happen. He's an amazing story. And finally, I want to leave you with this idea that innovation is not a solo game. Innovators are able to get others excited about their idea, on board with them, and join them. These students from Massachusetts have that feeling of sitting on a great idea. They're a team. They've just won a social enterprise business competition. They're going to get to take their idea and put it into action, and they're going to get lots of other people excited about it. So they give you a sense of what it feels like to have a great idea, to put it into action. And I want to finally leave you with this provocation. If not you, who's going to do it? And so I want you to tap your superpowers, have experiences that let you think about what you really care about, and then get busy putting your great ideas into action, because the world needs you and it needs your superpowers. Thank you.